We're going to crack straight ahead with our next panel discussion about financial software solutions. If you've got any questions to ask at any time throughout the panel, do try and catch my eye, shove your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you. If you're online, please use the chat function on screen. They'll come directly to my iPad, and if I remember to look at that, I will pass your questions on to our panel here, and I'll do a call for questions as well if I actually remember. So, and I thought we're talking about financial software solutions. I thought I'd offer a prize to the first panel member to mention AI.
That's what the prize is.
But look, I went to steal the chocolate bars from hospitality out there, and there was one left. So perhaps that's the booby prize for whoever mentions AI.
Take the vase.
Take the vase, yeah, and yeah, there's the chocolate there. So have your stopwatches on and see how soon it takes for us to get onto that. But look, seriously, panel, can I ask you to introduce yourselves first, because you'll do a much better job than I. Who you are, what you do, and some expertise that you bring.
Sure. So my name's Simon Foley. I'm from Lloyds Banking Group, so we're a very big group. I'm from the insurance division, so I am the engineering director for our workplace pensions and intermediary wealth businesses.
Hi, I'm Dave Smallwood. I'm the UK MD of a payment service provider headquartered in the Netherlands called Mollie. Mollie has about 250,000 customers across Europe. We've grown bootstrap for 15 years and then about $1 billion in funding over the last 5. So very, very quick scaling. And I run the UK team. There's about 30 to 35 of us here today.
Hi everyone, Ed Patrick. I work at Legal & General Asset Management in our technology division. My role is primarily to be the connective tissue between technology and the different business areas of the firm, who are all desperate to understand how they can engage with us. We're desperate to understand what the different business areas are thinking about, and hopefully we'll come together as one happy union.
So we've got two, should we say, legacy organisations, 250 to, 400 or whatever years old, and a 20-year-old very agile fintech organisation here. So it should be a great discussion. Can we kick off with just a general look at some of the projects that you are working on at the moment? Maybe give some examples of what you're up to, and the solutions and the approach to finding software solutions that you're taking.
Yeah, sure. So we're a growth business within, a big part of Lloyd's strategy is to grow what's called OOI, or other operating income. So that's really the bit of the money the bank makes that isn't based really on interest rates. So our division is a big part of growing that revenue stream. So for us, it's about really capturing the market. We're second to Aviva in workplace pensions, and we have big ambitions to be first. We bought a wealth business called Embark a few years ago, and we're starting to integrate that. So lots of scaling, big teams, 150 billion of assets under management. So really, my job is to help from an engineering perspective to scale that business out. We partner with a company called FNZ, which I'm sure lots of people here will be aware of, and really they're our technology partner from that point of view. So what we're doing is evolving our overall architecture with them. We tend to like to own our own digital experiences. So when you think about from an architecture perspective, we'll own the customer experience layer, and what we ask them to do is really develop a lot of the back-end processes and run tax wrappers and all that sort of stuff. So there's massive amounts of development going on year on year to grow the business.
And in doing so, what are the chief concerns that you have that you need to address? I mean, outside of this stage, you were talking about resilience being your number one priority, and your second and your third.
Yeah. So it's always, we say it's priority zero. Actually, we don't have a business if we don't have a resilient business. But we are a bank, so when you think about the parts of our business that customers depend on, like payments out, pensioners rely on us to pay their pensions every month. So in everything that we're doing, as we're evolving our architecture, we're thinking about how do we build resilience and test resilience at every part of that architecture. So what we're in terms of, we think about software solutions, we were trying to get to, so if we think about FNZ as an example, is let's use the best of what they bring in terms of their expertise, but the things we really want to control, so payments architecture being an example, we want to evolve an overall architecture that allows us to own and develop that part, which is really the part that needs to be massively resilient, and rely on the FNZ for the bits around, say, running tax wrappers or whatever that they have the expertise in. So it's a kind of evolution of an ecosystem that's important to us.
And can we perhaps jump to the other end of the panel next, as you are similarly an old and established company? What are you working on, and what are the approaches you're taking?
Well, I won't go for the chocolate just yet.
Okay.
So I think there's a theme around scalability, definitely, and trying to understand how we can maximise our processes and architecture in a scalable way as possible. So on one side of the fence, we're looking at our kind of core platforms and trying to understand how to make those as efficient, as robust, scalable as possible. On the other side of the equation, we're trying to also understand how we can be as nimble as possible. And I think that's where, you know, we look a lot for low-code, you know, SaaS solutions which enable our, which really encourage citizen development in a number of areas around our business. The skill then is to ensure that as we're encouraging citizen development, we're also ensuring that they've got the right, you know, resilience, security, permissioning around that. But that really pays dividends. The other consideration around citizen development is that as applications are being delivered in one particular area of the business, we find other areas of the business are also interested in that application, and so then we start to wrestle with, you know, how do you go about federating a particular application or microservice that might be needed by somebody else, and that's where you start to have to then overlay that previously nimble application with a little bit more of an enterprise-wide framework and architecture. So I guess, in short, you know, creating scale on our core platforms, encouraging nimbleness and microservices, micro apps on the other side of the equation.
I'm personally a control freak, and the thought of allowing your people to write their own code to solve their own problems would freak me out. Clearly, it's the way ahead for your organisation. What are the risks of that, and how do you guard against them?
So the risks are that ultimately we find ourselves in a Wild West environment where code is being delivered without the right people being aware of it, without potentially the right understanding of the interdependencies of a particular application. That certainly comes to fruition as applications start to integrate with others. You know, so where we create interdependencies with, you know, data sources, for example, you know, they've got to be watertight. I think there's also a risk that we create inadvertently an overly complex ecosystem that is harder to track. I think whilst this term of citizen development is very easy to throw around, as I have done, there are necessary stage gates at various points in the development of those tools. You know, we will have engineers who essentially sign off on the code at the right times, you know, we work very hard to ensure that we've got within our architecture teams to ensure that we've got the right level of transparency over what sits where, which is certainly something that we didn't have necessarily, you know, 2 or 3 years ago.
There's a whole question of build versus buy, which we'll pick up on.
Yeah, I just will build on that. This brings in the concept of developer productivity as well. So it's not just about allowing engineers to write code, but if you think about developer experience, one of the metrics we always think about is what does it take a developer from the day they join the organisation to get to writing Hello World? And actually, certainly within our organisations, it's probably the same for quite a lot of big financial services firms. The answer is quite a long time, because they've got to. It is quite difficult to be productive. And one of the things that we're doing, a lot of organisations are doing now, is starting to introduce internal developer platforms, which are really just curated environments where engineers will pick templated routes to live. So, if they're writing in .NET or Java or React or whatever it is, they've got highly curated stacks that they can build on where they're offered an automated route to live. So all of that kind of underlying infrastructure and all the stuff that kind of prevents you from being productive as a developer is all taken away. And it's also built within guardrails, to your point. So your point about the Wild West, you do need to, if you have 40 development teams, you'll have 40 different ways of writing applications. You do need to get to the point where you have, certainly in a regulated environment like ours, that you have very set guardrailed ways of getting to production, so that engineers can focus on the value and not on fighting legacy infrastructure or all the variability that goes with a big bank.
Dave, we must talk about the perspective from an agile young fintech that's only 20 years old.
Yeah.
What things are you wrestling with, and I wonder if any of these experiences feed into that?
It's the same. The slight difference is that our founder is a coder. He built the business from writing his first piece of code at the age of 15 or so, and he's been with the business ever since, 20 plus. Of those 20, 15 without any funding, so it's quite small, very tight team, and in the last 5 years, massive scale. So about 300-400-ish engineering folks, and it is citizen development, and it is released 4-hour test, that sort of thing. It's still secure, still resilient, but it's moving very, very quickly. They live by a methodology of always be shipping. Within our engineering teams, we're literally always shipping hundreds and hundreds of times a week. And the focus of the business right from the very, very beginning, but more so in the last 5 years, has been, let's get it right for small businesses. Let's make things work easily for small customers. They don't want to have to work out how to code. They don't want to have to do anything. It should just be simple for them to turn on and go. And everything that Mollie does is factored around that. And we've done really well at that across Europe, and now we're moving up market. And that's the focus now, is how do we do that at scale for really big companies? Yep. And that then enters the same challenge space that you guys are in.
Are there any emerging technologies then, which I've got my eye on the chocolate bar. Who's going to say that word first? Apart from AI, are there any technologies which you're particularly interested in the financial world, which you're trying to solve or deploy?
So trying to avoid there's lots in the AI space, so I'll try not to start there. Certainly, when we think about building scalable infrastructure, stuff like serverless architecture for us is quite exciting. We don't use a lot of it, but it's back to that thing about engineering teams not necessarily needing to worry about the underlying architecture to be able to just deploy quickly. That point you made about always shipping, that's not a pattern that you see very often in organisations like ours, but we're trying to find ways and use technologies to get us there. And so concepts like serverless, where essentially you're deploying an event-driven function that's run on the cloud, and so you can focus very much in on what does that function do, how does it deliver value, and not worry so much about essentially the cloud platform runs the underlying infrastructure for you. Those are the sorts of things that, as we evolve our architecture, are going to become more and more useful to drive productivity.
Sure. Yeah, I think perhaps not necessarily emerging, but emerged technology is proving very useful as we start to wrestle with the sheer amount of data that we have to support. So, for example, thinking about how we get to a place where we move to, zero copy data delivery. For example, recently we've been implementing Snowflake into our ecosystem, understanding how we can expose data via that central platform into other areas of the business. Focusing a lot on our CRM tooling. We're a Salesforce user. How do we put more data into the arms of our distribution teams so that they can gain better insights and enable and generate improved sales enablement. Data is a key area for us in terms of the big, relatively large investment spend. The other area I think for us is around how we can expose data more effectively to our clients. So we've got a portal, we've got a client portal, like most people have got some form of engagement platform. We're, as an insurance-owned asset manager, we're probably on the less innovative end of the spectrum, I would suggest. But
I wasn't going to say.
But we are very conscious that our client base, which is more institutional as a client base, is seeking more and more analytics, more and more insights into how their portfolios are working. So we are focusing a lot on how we essentially surface up all our internal IP and applications to be able to be put into the arms of our clients, who then can get to grips with a data that is essentially theirs, but it means they don't have to wait until the month-end report or fact sheet or whatever. It's always there available. So that's an area that we're focusing a lot on.
On our side, the partnerships that we have is a very core part of our strategy, and every partnership is a technology and every partnership is an integration, and we do that so that our clients don't have to. So we spend a lot of our time and energy and engineering resource in that area of the business, making sure that we can get that technology, make it available, make it easily usable by our clients. So it isn't involving that competition over there at all in the main.
Well, look, it's time we broke into the chocolate. So, can you give us some examples of how you are deploying AI solutions? And I'd be particularly interested to hear the difficulties and the pitfalls that you've encountered in doing so, that people can take away and learn from the scars off your back.
So for us, like every organisation like us, we're going for AI in a big way. So I think the first part of that is really learning and education. So, everybody in every function is being put through some sort of development in terms of where AI is just now, whether it's what the meaning of agentic or, how LLMs work, whatever it is. There's a big education process going on to just try and make AI a familiar part of the everyday language of the organisation. We've gone big on Copilot, so we starting to use Copilot, the various versions of Copilot as a standard productivity tool. And then what we're doing, rather than doing proofs of concept and experimentation as such, we're actually going for a set number of about 50 or 60 use cases to go into production. So our strategy is very much, rather than endless experimentation, which is where these things tend to fail, is we're actually going to pick use cases through your normal kind of investment business case process, but actually get to the point where those things are implemented in production, and we won't stop until that's the case. So, they fall into, we've got a few customer-facing stuff. So obviously, from our point of view, the highest risk. So we have a few customer-facing examples. In my area, we're looking at a kind of investment agent for providing financial guidance for direct-to-consumer. So in other words, end customers coming to us. We're starting to experiment with that. We're also doing a lot on the colleague side. So a lot of our HR interactions with colleagues are going to be very soon driven through a kind of AI-based interface. Things like credit risk and fraud analytics, all that kind of stuff, which is really right for AI's use. So there's a number of things we're doing, but we're really going for that in a big way. I think the challenge, I think somebody, one of our CEOs said, part of the problem with, say, things like agentic systems, nobody's built them yet. You're going to get the first few goes wrong. And particularly where you're customer facing, that is a challenge, and you have to be really super careful about how you engage customers, how you roll it out, so that you're very clear, because you are going to make mistakes in the implementation.
Forgive me if I'm misconstruing that. What challenges are there in having AI deployments when you have an established bespoke legacy system? Are there particular challenges or not?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, I wouldn't say you would necessarily mix the two. To make these implementations work, you need the underlying data set. So I think where a lot of organizations will struggle is where they haven't got the data organization in place. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of investment we're doing to try and kind of build that data platform, which is supremely hard to do. I mean, we've had a couple of goes at building a kind of data lake idea, but we are really investing a lot in in where our data lives and in the structure of our data, because we know that's going to be the foundation on which we build. So until really you've got that, scaling these kind of AI-based solutions is going to be quite challenging. So I think having the underlying infrastructure in place is probably the immediate challenge. I don't think necessarily we have a legacy estate, right? I don't think necessarily that stops us from innovating. We've just got to be careful about how, evolving our overall architecture. So, we're doing that AI innovation in one place, and we're doing all of our legacy simplification and decommissioning. That journey doesn't stop. So almost one replaces the other.
Do the new agile challenger organizations buy that?
Yeah, definitely. But it's going to be harder to do it at scale and to have huge impact. But you can definitely get projects off the ground and get them working and then scale them, for sure. At Mollie, we've gone very heavily on customer-first AI solutions. So our customer service, we're at about 80% of first-point resolution using AI on chat and email as well. And then that last 20% is the juice that we have to work on. And our teams work really hard to get things right for those customers. And that's just one area that we've done very, very well at. And it helps that our CTO became our CEO, and he's very AI focused as well. So that's very, very helpful to have that sort of support within the business. We're doing it everywhere, and we're actually doing it even more, or deploying AI use cases in commercial teams and client-facing sales roles, customer success teams. How do you have that first initial conversation? What things are you doing right, and what didn't you talk about in that meeting that you should have talked about? Literally every aspect of what we do is running through these models and tools, and it's driving efficiency. To your point about data foundations being right, we've had some interesting examples of our data foundations being a little bit out of date, and then the AI saying stuff that isn't true. So you have to stay on top of that stuff always, and the only way to do that is with people. So what we're finding across all of these use cases is it's not a replacement, it's an enhancement, and it makes it easier, makes it simpler for us to get to that first point resolution with the client and make their lives easier. But that's it.
I'm interested then again, as we started off, about what pitfalls and challenges you've had to overcome in terms of making your AI blend seamlessly with your existing systems.
Yeah, I've certainly recognised as a number of challenges in the way in which we get comfortable with AI solutions from vendors. And I say that from the perspective of, we get a lot of vendors, coming to us showing us something new and shiny and exciting. An area in particular for us where those vendors gravitate is research. So we see a really compelling use case for our investment research teams to be able to harness information, both kind of licensed information or information just available on the web at great speed, and enabling our researchers to cut through a huge amount of pages of documents to get to the heart of a particular approach or decision or view that they want to take about a company. It also enables us as a research group to be able to provide much faster insights to our portfolio managers, and that speed of market means improved performance for our funds. So it's something we're super interested in tackling. But to the point around the challenge is to understand where to draw the line. We've been working on prototypes involving a number of different vendors. The vendors are constantly evolving. They're typically nimble sort of startups. They can react very quickly to our feedback. They can very quickly understand exactly what we require, and they're all sort of out competing each other seemingly week by week. So we've kind of come to a position where actually we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket. We're going to continue just to prototype and just take a relatively small investment over a period of time with each of these vendors, and understand how we learn more about the capabilities and tooling over maybe more of a 6 to 12 month period, without sort of, as I say, putting all our eggs on one in one basket. So that breadth and speed of development is something that we kind of wrestle with, because it's not something we're used to, frankly. That definitely springs to mind.
I think interesting. And you really want to, I think we have the same thing, you really want to try and absorb as much of the cultural aspect of that as the technology. I think one of the other, you were just talking about challenges is the regulator. We're highly regulated, and actually one of the things, when we've set out on these kind of early use cases for AIs that surprised us a little bit is how the regulator is engaged with us. Actually, I think there's a sense there that, well, this is coming. We actually want to work with you. We want you to be transparent with us, and we'll create sandboxes and create kind of joined up environments where you can help us understand what you're doing. Because probably from their
help us how to regulate.
Yeah, exactly. So to learn actually how to regulate this stuff, because otherwise, because I think they kind of see what's coming, and a hallucinating model providing customers with financial guidance is probably one of their worst nightmares. So it is actually quite refreshing to see the conversation that's happening with the regulator that's maybe not typical for for innovations in the past.
Sure. I'd suggest another challenge that we face is around identifying use cases which pack sufficient punch, have the right level of return on investment. Because our understanding, our confidence in AI is in its relative infancy at the moment. Therefore, we're not going to be wanting to make very heavy bets on transforming our organisation in a way that which we may be able to do in 3, 4, 5 years' time. We're kind of starting small, but by starting small, what we find is each business case that presents itself doesn't necessarily have sufficient benefit associated with it, whether it be around cost efficiency, cost avoidance, revenue generation. That's not really the space that we're playing in at the moment. It's more, we're more seemingly sort of testing the waters in a number of different ways, learning a hell of a lot as we're doing that, by the way. But I don't think we're quite yet in a position where we've got something that really is going to be a dial mover from an AI perspective just yet.
Are there any questions at this point from the audience? You've got a panel of experts here who can solve all of your financial software problems. I think that's what the brief was, wasn't it? Any questions before we... No, you touched on return on investment, which I wanted to pick up on. How do you measure that in terms of your software deployments? What are the yardsticks? How do you get it past the CFO, or is it just is it a case of little by little experimentation that's welcomed in your organisations?
So, generally speaking, yes. I mean, historically, I would say, the obvious answer is the kind of cost save, right? So, how much cost can you take out of the organisation by deploying X? And that's generally the way, from an investment perspective, we look at it. That is notoriously hard to get right. And particularly if you're doing long implement, yes, you break it up, but ultimately, very often to get the value out of software components, it does take quite a long time to implement what you're trying to implement. So really predicting and then measuring ROI beyond just cost save is quite hard. I think one of the things that's important to us is to think as much about non-financial ROI as about financial ROI. So really, particularly when we've just been talking about AI, measuring ROI on AI tools right now would be tremendously difficult, I think. But actually, the value in terms of the effect these tools have on driving innovation, on changing the way people think in the organisation, the learning opportunity, I think some of those things at this stage in the cycle are as important as actually, does deploying X save Y? So I think that's what you think about it.
On our side, we've put a gate in to get use cases through to actually making a decision about whether or not we should invest in them, and it's use the tools we have. Build an MVP using Gemini. Get the thing working to a basic level and show us that it could work, and then we can test another tool that might be the best in class. And the learning that we get from that initial self-built citizen development of getting the thing off the ground and working out the core, like the main part of the solution, it then helps us work out what the cost save or the incrementality could be. And then we come to that decision on should we invest and work with a third party or not, with much more information. So we're coming to that conversation with actually this works and we could do a hell of a lot better if we paid for it.
Yeah. I think we don't major on the technology per se. We major more on the wider operating model that we want to deploy to support a particular area of the business, and we have the common business benefits that we want to see, whether that be revenue generation, protection, cost avoidance, cost reduction, risk reduction, so typically we have a policy of wanting to buy before we build. So that guides us, and that's where we would. That's where we would typically frame our business case in terms of the cost estimates that go alongside that. But ultimately, and increasingly, the name of the game is that business case has got to wash its face. And it gets harder and harder to get those business cases approved, frankly. We've spoken a bit about the client-facing technologies and what we do to enable sales. That's always, I've found, one of the hardest areas of a business case to frame. What is the benefit? How do you monetize a client experience? So all ears around that topic. That's. We have, as you'll have guessed, we have a relatively structured, rigid way of being able to position a business case, and the SaaS licensing, the implementation is one relatively small component of that.
So as people who are intimately and hugely involved with the software aspects of your companies, what have been the game changers over the past maybe 2 years, 1 year, that have really, from your perspectives, transformed either your function or the function of the company? What are you're not allowed to talk about AI in this. I'm picking perhaps back up on citizen development. I wonder if that's been a game changer for you. I wonder what other game changers that you can call out.
So for our business, I would say contact center, there's a next generation of contact center technology that we're now deploying that I think, when I think about the Scottish Widows business, will be one of the biggest game changers. We spend a lot of money. So we're in the pensions and investments game. Most customers, understandably, don't understand pensions. So there is a lot of customer interaction with the operation, and that can be quite challenging, and it's expensive for us to run. And we really want to improve the quality of experience for the customer, and we want to improve the quality of experience for the colleague. The kind of technology that the colleague operations teams are running to try and service this stuff is pretty archaic, complex to run. So we're just taking a massive step forward in terms of deploying a third-party next-gen contact center that will really improve the colleague experience. But importantly, and I won't go into, there are AI implications for this, but really it's about helping us then by gathering, voice analytics and all of the kind of operational data that go around customer interactions. It'll really transform, I think, our ability to understand how our customers are interacting with us and how our customers are interacting with our products. And that gives us data insight that we can then feed back into the product development lifecycle in a way that we've just never done before, because we've really relied on experts within our operation, of which there are many, to tell us what's wrong, why things are wrong, what customers are struggling with. And it's not really been data-driven, it's really been kind of heuristic, if you like. So I think that we're in the process of rolling that out. Insurance is going to pre-run the bank on that, but I think once we really make that effective, it will be a game changer for our business.
Simple one for me is pretty much most of our leadership and 2 or 3 levels down conversations are all recorded, transcribed, everything, and we run through those with machine learning. It's not AI, and pull out themes, etc. as well, to then guide what are the main topics that the leadership team needs to solve. And it is really eye-opening, because you think you've got a problem, you're trying to solve it over here, and there's 6 other departments all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we get that together? And that has been very eye-opening, and the same thinking is then applied to customer conversations as well.
I'd say distributed ledger technology for us is increasingly feels like a game changer, pretty much month on month, whether that be. And I'm thinking here around the opportunities within an asset manager for fund tokenisation. So identifying new distribution channels for digitally native investors to be able to tap into our funds, to use tokens to generate a number of different operating efficiencies, to use tokens to improve our the way in which we manage collateral. There's a number of very interesting use cases that, if not are widely adopted in practice, are certainly getting an awful lot of focus and attention at the moment. There's lots of prototypes and so on being delivered these days. So that's really exciting for us.
One last question. Offer some advice to the people in this room who, I guess, are either selling some software or are daily bombarded by people who want to sell some software. How do you navigate that jungle? I detected, and I could be wrong, Ed, I detected in your organisation that you do a lot more in-house, and there's a reluctance to buy in. Have I got that wrong? But how do you navigate that jungle of what is the next trinket, and do you actually need it, and should we be implementing it?
Well, we do as a principle look to buy before we build, and I like to think we've got a number of good partnerships which help us navigate potential vendors. and there's a hell of a lot of information just available through Copilot, for example, that helps with identifying who we might want to participate in an RFP, for example. I wrestle a little bit with the sheer volume of intros that I get in my inbox, which I can't keep up with. But at least I know where these people are when I file them away under certain folders. So I think what I'd call out Gartner. Actually, I think Gartner is really helpful for us in terms of helping us understand who we might want to go for what particular use case. So that helps.
Yeah, similar. I mean, we use Gartner a lot as well. I think, facing into my organisation as a vendor must be tough, right? I do get that.
Got scars on your back.
That is for sure. I'm sure there are plenty of scars. I've been on the other end. I think my advice is probably, as the engineering guy, the same as probably heard a lot. One, in the conversation, focus on the value. We get sold a lot of stuff, and everybody's got the latest and greatest on everything. I think the bigger thing for me is we've talked about in the previous part of the conversation about iteration and about breaking the problem down. I think early wins is important. So projects tend to do well, and vendors involved in projects in Lloyds tend to do well if they can show value early, even if it's quite draft, even if it's quite prototypical. I think that's massive because at the end of the day, building a vendor relationship for an executive in the bank is a risk. It's always going to be. There's always somebody in the end's got to take a risk on you. If you can demonstrate, so there's a confidence building phase you need to go through. So projects where it's a year, 18 months to value is just really difficult to keep going. If you can show within the first 1 to 3 months the first green shoots of value, that I think just starts to build confidence because people can start to talk about it. So that would be my advice.
Dave, how does a fintech sell its wares to guys like this?
And so we are that company that builds first and then thinks about buying. And I think we get to a position where we're like, okay, we think we want to invest in this area now. Let's go and find some people. And there's quite a big piece of work on that. So we go across Gartner, G-Cloud, G2, and all the rest to try and work out who the right people are. And then in that engagement with them, we'll probably give them all a bit of a trial and a test, and it's where the relationship is strongest, who aligns with our culture. On a Saturday night when things aren't working, are they going to be there? That sort of stuff. I would. It's about relationships. I think is probably the short answer there. It's once you get to that buying cycle, it's actually about building the relationship of trust and reliability. Yeah.
Okay. In the absence of any questions, he says, just looking for a hand. There's a hand. One question there, please. Izzy, the mic. Running across at lightning speed. Gentleman over there.
I'm curious to know your opinions on how to deal with the financial crime prevention, fraud prevention, and money laundering prevention. Thinking about the next, as you're using AI for good things, there are a lot of people using AI for bad stuff, and deep fakes, and this is so accessible for everyone right now. So just curious to know your views.
So something that's massively front of mind for us, and we invest more and more every year in ECP ECP systems. But it is, I've seen on the front line within Scottish Widows what these deep fakes can do and how they can get past your defences. So huge investment in process and technology to try and build those kind of defensive walls around our processes. But it's a huge battle. There's no doubt about it. The technology is amazing.
Yeah, the training that we just receive as employees at Legal & General has increased exponentially over the years in terms of just helping us understand how we avoid phishing mails and so forth. is incredible, and it is scary.
Yeah.
I would say we're in the business of payments, and this is a very, very hot topic in payments. And I think identity is probably the long-term solution for this, is proving that person is a person. And there's lots of companies building that now. So I think that will be the future of where that thread is going in the payments world. Is like, are you buying? Is it an AI buying, or is it a person?
Thank you for raising the question, which was on my list of stuff to try and cover, but I thought, we haven't got any time for. But you've got it in. Thank you very much. We are going to have to close and move on. Panel, thank you very much indeed for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Your panel on financial services.